Newcastle, Newcastle, Newcastle. Now I'm an Arsenal fan, and I saw my team draw 2-2 against Fulham yesterday, having victory snatched right at the death after Paulinho equalized against 10 men. So I was deservedly a little sad, but I understood it because Fulham played a good game and Arsenal left the window open for them to equalize. But Newcastle took it to a whole different level today. Liverpool were down a man for the better part of this game. Newcastle had dominated this game up until the last 15 or so minutes. And when Jurgen Klopp brought Nunes in, you knew he was throwing in the last dice, and he was going to do whatever he could to try and salvage at least a point. Because at that particular point, you are thinking of just throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, to try and make whatever stick. Newcastle had played better against 11 men than they did against 10 men. All they needed was just that one goal. Miggy Almiron could have done it. Harvey Barnes and Callum Wilson had an opportunity to do it as well. But somehow Newcastle turned a victory that should be comfortable into a loss that was more devastating than Arsenal's draw against Fulham yesterday. Now, I know I sound dramatic because it could happen to anybody, right? But I am now considering Newcastle part of the big boys club, and I am not going to let you guys slip with this. It is inexcusable how you let 10-man Liverpool back into a game that you had dominated, whether it was 11v11 or 11v10. All Liverpool had to do was be more compact, be more precise with their passing, and limit you guys to very few chances as they could. Barricade themselves behind the 18-yard box and hope for the best. Now, we can touch on the fact that Liverpool are a good counter-attacking team, and we saw signs of the old Liverpool as far as them going forward once they knew that the game was going to be stretched. And surprisingly enough, Newcastle were going to be tired, something that we're not used to seeing them being, especially towards the end of last season when Newcastle seemed to outlast teams a lot more. My name is Izzy, and if you're meeting me for the first time, welcome. Please consider hitting that like button at the bottom, and please subscribe and join my community as we are going to be talking everything Premier League. Newcastle have a decidedly bad record against Liverpool, but going into this game, they were perceived by many as quite possibly favorites. Liverpool's midfield is in disarray. Fabinho has left. Naby Keita has left. Oxlade-Chamberlain, even if he is not a number 6, has left. And so you have a primarily new midfield trio that was playing against Newcastle today, who within themselves also have Tonali as a new player, but he has been bedding in well with the team, and previous results were favorable to Newcastle, a 5-1 thumping of Aston Villa and a not so bad 1-0 loss to Manchester City, in which City stifled Newcastle for most of the game, but it was at the Etihad, and you can excuse that. But today, Liverpool were traveling to St. James's Park, and the last few weeks have not been very positive to Liverpool, having lost out to Chelsea as far as Caicedo's transfer and Lavia's transfer, and they just managed to get in Endo a couple of weeks ago and still have to bet him into the team. But today you saw classic Jurgen Klopp, that mentality monster attitude that Liverpool had carried for the last 5 or 6 years as they battled against Manchester City to try and take a title. I touched on being an Arsenal fan. Much more recently, Arsenal has had a terrible record against Manchester City. So I know how Newcastle feel whenever they face Liverpool. It is just that team that for whatever reason, no matter how well you play, no matter how badly you play, you will lose to them. Newcastle have not beaten Liverpool in 14 prior meetings to today. And now you can count it as 15. Because everything was stacked against Liverpool today. Newcastle are on a bounce. They are the new boys in the big boys club. They have a settled midfield. They have a good backline. They are defensively solid, and they were a man up today. Not to mention, they were playing at St. James's Park, one of the most vociferous crowds that you will ever encounter in the Premier League. So how did Newcastle turn this from a victory that should have been comfortable to a 2-1 loss? Well, number one, Newcastle did not take their opportunities after Van Dijk was red carded. Fairly, in my opinion. I do think it was a last man challenge. Some people could say, hey, it was a little bit harsh, but I do think that if that ball would have rolled past Alexander Isak, he was going to have a one-on-one opportunity with Alisson. Now, whether he would have taken it is another question, but that was a denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. So a red card that was warranted, in my opinion. And by that point, Liverpool were kind of teetering on losing a man after Alexander-Arnold had pushed over Gordon, which could have feasibly been another yellow card. All in all, the stage was set. Newcastle were now facing Liverpool a man down. Gordon had scored, and all they had to do was either add a second, stifle Liverpool up until they get a second goal. That didn't happen. What proceeded to happen was Liverpool ended up having one of the best defensive showings that I have seen this season. Alisson came up with a couple of very good saves. One in particular from Miggy Almiron, which I thought was superb. Kind of reminiscent of Ramsdale's save a couple of seasons back against Leicester from a free kick. But no matter how much the cast changes over the years, no matter who's in the dugout, Newcastle seemed to have a mental block against Liverpool. Much in the same way as Arsenal seemed to have a mental block against City. Since Pep Guardiola has joined Manchester City, Arsenal have not taken a single point in any of their fixtures, home or away, against Manchester City. Now, while Newcastle have earned the odd draw against Liverpool in the last few years, they haven't beaten them in 14 attempts. Make that 15 now. And sometimes it just becomes a mental block. And when Darwin Núñez slotted in the first goal from a very tight angle, you could fear the worst for Newcastle. And as it was, Mohamed Salah put a sumptuous pass that, for whatever reason, Dan Burns was not hip enough to see Darwin Núñez roll right past him, and a second goal went in. Newcastle were great for the first 20 to 30 minutes of this game. And I feel like if they would have just stepped on the gas a little bit more, they could have vanquished Liverpool. They would have beaten the daylights out of Liverpool because they were playing that well. So where does this leave Newcastle? You're one of the big boys now. We cannot take this as one of those losses where you will try and make the best out of it and say, well, they can learn from this type of fixture and they will be better for it 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, and they'll have the experience of having faced Manchester City and Liverpool, two of the hardest games in the season, and they will learn from the mistakes they made. This was inexcusable from Newcastle, in my opinion. I count you as one of the big boys. And just as I criticized Arsenal yesterday for drawing the game against a Fulham team that was down to 10 men, Liverpool were there for the taking. All they had to do was try and continue isolating Trent Alexander-Arnold or taking advantage of the speed that Gordon or Miggy was going to give them on the wings and expose Liverpool further. They did not take their chances. And in games like these, if you don't take your chances against a seasoned manager like Jurgen Klopp, you are going to get punished. And they got punished, and duly so. This was a game that I was so disappointed by. I feel sorry for the St. James's Park crowd because this was the type of game that would have given them the lift that they needed to keep on pushing forward. And admittedly, I might be making very concrete remarks about Newcastle's prospects in the future based off of just 2 games. Just as far as like most people did with their very first game against Aston Villa, where they did look good. However, Aston Villa did look undercooked. And since then, Aston Villa have been looking a lot better since that 5-1 defeat. So I don't want to hear any excuses from Newcastle fans. They are just 2 seasons into the vision that they're eventually going to have. They need to get over this hump that they have against Liverpool, much in the same way as Arsenal need to get over the hump that they have against Manchester City. Eventually, you know they will. because Newcastle are on the upward trajectory. But this was an important game, and there's no telling psychologically how much of a boost this will give to Liverpool, because Liverpool were fantastic. They kept the score down long enough for them to bring in Nunez and for him to have a strong impact in the game. 2 wonderfully taken goals. The first a little bit lucky, but you have to take your chances when you're given the opportunities. And before that, I do think that Salah's interplay with McAllister was really good, and that was part of the reason why Nunez was able to get the ball and slot it in the back of the net. Now, Botman was having a terrible last 15 minutes, and he had to go off injured just a little bit after that. And being that they are going to be Arsenal's challengers for that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th position as it stands right now, because I think Manchester City are still insurmountable in the title race, I wanted them to lose. I was a magpie today. But kudos to Jurgen Klopp and for what he was able to do with his team. Whether he had Nunez on the bench, seething with anger, wanting to be in that starting 11 and wanting to prove that he is the type of striker that Liverpool need and capitalize on that emotion, I salute him completely. As for Newcastle, 2 losses on the bounce, 2 admittedly hard losses, but the Liverpool game was there for the taking. And it is inexcusable to lose a game of that magnitude and with the hand that Liverpool were dealt with. Now, Liverpool's 10 players are good, but we've seen Newcastle destroy teams 11v11, and they were beating Liverpool 11v11 comfortably in almost all aspects of the game. As far as it goes, this is a much needed lift for Liverpool. And who knows how far this can go in kickstarting and igniting the team spirit that we are so familiar in seeing Jurgen Klopp's team fostering at the start of the season. This was classic Liverpool from 3-4 years ago. A team that does not want to be beaten, a team that is well organized, and a team that galvanized each and every aspect of the game to make themselves winners at the end. Thank you for watching this video. If you're new to this, please hit that like button and that subscribe button to join my community. And to any new subscribers, come on in. I promise you, you will not regret it. And until next time, guys, peace.